Hello. You cited a list of statistics in your talk which you claim support the idea that illegal immigrants are dangerous or criminals.
I cited a number of statistics that show that they commit federal crimes at a significantly higher rate than native-born Americans. Yeah.
Okay. So what role do you think that structural racism and inherent bias has to play in those statistics?
I don't think that the people who enter this country illegally are forced to do so by some sort of systemic racism. There's no systemic American racist going down to El Salvador and saying, you better get up and sneak into the United States. And there's nobody in the United States who forces people who come here illegally to commit crimes. I think the premise of this question is actually quite offensive, though it's a popular assumption, which is that illegal aliens somehow don't have free will. It's the assumption that illegal aliens are somehow morally uneducated. They have no sense of right and wrong. They have no ability to control their emotions and their impulses. This is obviously profoundly racist and not true. We have free will. We have the ability to do what we want to do. This is why, by the way, the majority of Hispanic people in the United States and Hispanic voters oppose illegal immigration. The races are exactly the same. The ethnicity is exactly the same. The question of crime is different because race does not determine your criminality.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that people of color are more likely to be convicted of crimes unfairly than white people.
They're more likely to commit certain crimes. That's true. I don't think that's because of their race. I think it's because of aspects of their free will and perhaps of culture.
That's not true. I'm talking about...
That is true. I mean, what I just said is true.
I'm not quite sure where you're getting your statistics from, and you choose
from the federal government.
You choose to interpret
from
them in your...
Bureau of Justice Statistics and Department of Homeland Security.
Can I talk? Is that
well,
okay?
you said you didn't know where I got my statistics from, and I'm telling you where I get them from.
Well, it would have been nice if you could have let me finish my sentence. Anyway,
I was answering your question.
You are using your statistics for your own political agenda, and that's your prerogative.
I'm citing statistics because they're true.
I'm talking about the fact that I'm faculty here. I also support our protester in the back.
What do you support specifically? Do you think that anti-immigrant rhetoric is violent free speech?
Yes, because of the reasons
you think that speech is violence?
No, I think that
that's what that sign says.
The conversation that you're having is oppressive.
So I am oppressing people by what I'm doing. So I am exerting violence on people by my speech. That's what the sign says, and that's what you just said.
It contributes to...
And the protester is saying that's exactly what I'm doing, and she's saying that's exactly what her sign means. So that means that you, a faculty member at an American public university, paid for by taxpayer dollars, are conflating speech with violence.
Yes. Speech can be violent. What you are saying contributes to systemic racism in this country. It means that my students of color are pulled over and accused of stealing a car when they did not.
I'm not pulling anybody over for stealing any cars.
I'm not saying that you
I see many
did.
people of many different races in this room. They all seem to be doing just fine. I don't think any of them have felt violence because they listened to a lecture on basic facts about our immigration system. The question was, have I asked people in this room if they've felt as though some violence has been committed on them? No, I haven't asked, because no violence has been committed on you. Because violence is not a subjective feeling. Violence is an objective fact. I can objectively gauge whether or not someone has become violent. The other day, I was at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Some protester attacked me with some weird chemical. That was an objective act of violence. But somebody disagreeing with me, such as some people in this room are doing, are not committing violence on me. And I would say to you, as a faculty member at a taxpayer-funded university, this is the foundation of liberal education. If you cannot understand that there is a difference between speech and violence, you don't understand anything that undergirds the liberal arts or liberal education. And that is a real shame. And I say this with all respect and with great distress for our universities. If our teachers don't understand the difference between ideas and violence, between speech and violence, then they are in no position to educate the next generation of Americans.
I've been to art school for 8 years. I understand liberal arts extremely well. I am an artist, and I
I don't think you do. I'm sure you've been to art school for 8 years, but you
there
do not
is
understand the
holding up a
liberal
sign
arts.
which says "Disrupting speech is fascism." You are
No. The sign says
disrupting
anti. Oh,
me.
that one. Disrupting speech.
Yeah.
But yes,
See, you understand?
Yes,
You
these
get
people
it?
who are yelling are disrupting my speech, and
You're
I agree. It's
interrupting me.
fascism.
You're interrupting me, and I think that you need to look up violence in the dictionary or expand your idea of violence.
Hold on, I'll look it up right now. Hold on. Hold on a second. Let me look it up. Let's see. Violence definition. Hold on. Violence definition. So you're saying that violence can be speech. Oh, my Wi-Fi went out. That's too bad. I'll look it up later. I'll post it on my Twitter. Violence is not speech. Let me say it again. Violence is not speech. Let me say it for all the professors in the room. Violence is not speech. Speech is not violence.
Yes, sir. Hi, I'm Kat. I'm a liberal studies major here at Cal State LA. I wanted to mention a few points that you brought up earlier in your speech. You said that because we think walls are wrong, we must also think walls are sinful.
No, that's what Nancy Pelosi said. That's not what I said.
That's what, okay. So Nancy Pelosi
it's immoral.
said that
Immoral.
walls are immoral and sinful. Okay. So you also said that the U.S. intervened, that the U.S. funnels money into other countries, right? In aid and things like that.
Right, much more than any other country in the history of the world by a long shot.
Did you also talk about how the U.S. intervenes in countries in other ways, like war, and that the U.S. is tearing up these countries? And
which countries
these are
in particular
the
are you
that are
concerned
fleeing. Okay, so
You mean when the United States invaded Afghanistan to overturn the Taliban? Do you think? Well, you're because you're making statements that are not specific.
Look,
so I want to get to the heart of your question.
Okay, but let me just, with what I'm giving you right now, try to answer my question. Okay, so if the U.S. is intervening in countries, and these
when we
countries
give foreign aid, we
have
intervene.
immigrants that are fleeing, where do you expect these immigrants to go when the U.S. intervenes in these countries that don't ask for U.S. intervention?
Which country? Well, yes, the Taliban in Afghanistan didn't ask for U.S.
I'm just
intervention.
leaving it as
Well, I
an
guess they
open
did ask
general
for
question.
it when they
I'm
flew
not going to
two planes.
specifically narrow it down to any sort of
I know you
specific...
can't narrow it down because when you get specific, your point falls apart. In
No.
the general, your point sounds like it makes sense.
Listen
but in
to
the
me.
specific, it doesn't make sense.
Are you going to let me? Okay. So, where do you expect these immigrants to go?
You're blaming the United States for the free actions of people. I mean, if your point is that...
But you know what's out of these people's control is U.S. intervention in their countries, right?
Well, U.S. foreign aid is intervention in other countries. I don't think that they would say no to that sort of intervention. What specific intervention do you take issue with? What specific intervention do you believe is egregious and the fault of the United States and demands that we not have national borders?
So, what if somebody I support over there is holding up a sign that says anti-immigrant rhetoric is violent free speech. And the reason they're holding up that sign is because this anti-immigrant rhetoric became violent when children began being put in cages and attacked.
You mean during the Obama administration? Oh, okay, all right. Well, go protest Barack Obama. Don't go protest me.
You want this to continue, right?
You're saying that the anti-immigrant rhetoric became violent when Barack Obama put kids in cages, and this is somehow my responsibility?
This is
what would
part
you like
of
me to...
what makes it violent, is that there's children in cages. You mentioned women that
there
become
aren't
raped.
children in cages,
You
by the
mentioned
way.
women that are raped when they cross the border, but you're not mentioning the children that are being raped in the detention centers at your borders.
Well, 80% of women and girls who cross the border illegally are raped along that journey by the sadistic sociopaths who have been permitted to run free along the border. What percentage of children who have been brought in by their parents to this foreign country, what percentage of children are you suggesting are being raped by U.S. government officials?
Well, where are the children in the detention centers?
Hold
There's
on,
children that went missing as well.
You made a claim, and I'm just asking what percentage of the children being... You said U.S. children in U.S. detention are being raped by government officials. Do you have any evidence for that whatsoever?
Government officials.
You said they're being
raped in detention centers.
By
I never
whom?
mentioned by who.
By whom? By whom are you suggesting?
Okay, but who's keeping these detention centers?
So you don't have by whom are you saying they're being victimized? If there is an epidemic of children being victimized in these detention centers, and you have some evidence of that, you better present that. That sounds like a terrible thing. So children are separated from their parents, not because of a policy of Donald Trump, not even because of a policy of Barack Obama, but because of a policy that was determined in 1997 called the Flores Agreement during the Clinton administration. And the reason for that is that when illegal aliens come into our country, they are apprehended by law enforcement. But if they're held for longer than a short period of time, you can't put children in jails. I don't think anybody wants us to put children in jails. That is literally caging children. So the children are separated from their parents because the parents are dealt with by law enforcement and the children are dealt with by the Department of Health and Human Services. The only alternative to this would be to put children in jails or else to let the parents go free without any consequences for entering the country, which is to say the only alternative is totally open borders in the United States. Is that what you're suggesting?
So you're saying the children in cages right now aren't?
Which children how many children are in cages right now?
The children at the
How many?
detention centers.
You're so certain of this. How many children are in cages right now?
The federal government received more than 4,500 complaints in 4 years about the sexual abuse of immigrant children who were being held at government-funded detention facilities, including an increase in complaints while the Trump administration's policy of separating migrant families at the border was in place.
There's also been a surge in illegal immigration. We now have 3,000 people per month coming into this country, and a surge in children. So naturally, any offense that involves children is going to increase. I agree with you. Illegal immigration is a horrific and immoral action, and it should not be encouraged by craven politicians who think that they can grab a few extra votes by encouraging the victimization of desperate foreigners and their children.
How you doing?
How you doing?
I'm a big supporter of the Daily Wire.
Thank you.
I like Ben Shapiro, regardless of what people think of him.
I'm a little lukewarm on him, but that's okay.
I see how he thinks about you. What I don't understand is why a lot of my own people don't see that the Democratic Party is politicizing us and using us to pass laws that aren't going to actually benefit us. I feel like a lot of us are blind, as far as speaking English or Spanish. I couldn't imagine going to China and not learning the language. How would I go find where the bathroom is or
any other country on earth?
But I don't think people should not speak the language. They could speak it in their house, but how would they communicate with their neighbors? I'm wondering when being proud to be an American became racist when America doesn't have a race.
I'm wondering exactly the same thing. I think part of that is because you have people, we've now heard from 2 faculty members at this university who have said that if you hold the opinions that you and I hold, that we are fascist, we are racist, and we are committing violence against Latinos. Apparently you're committing violence against Latinos. I didn't know this. You're apparently self-flagellating or something like that. This is an opinion held by 2 white liberal people who are teaching at this university. And I point them out because it creates a culture that stifles free speech. It is no accident that the vast majority of virtually every voting demographic in this country, including Hispanics, including Democrats, opposes illegal immigration. And yet, in the popular culture, if you were to say that, you would be baselessly smeared as some sort of bigot or some sort of fascist or some sort of whatever stupid slur you want to throw in. The only thing that we can possibly do is speak up and look them in the eye and convince our neighbors and not allow them to bully us and shut us up. But it looks like nobody's going to bully and shut you up, so that's a very good thing.
And I find it funny that these 2 non-Mexican professors are trying to speak for me. I don't need anybody to defend my race for me. I wonder how many Mexicans that they help on a daily basis, if they're buying flowers off of people on the side of the freeways, or if they're judging people like me, when we walk by them. I get judged on my race a lot by these people, but yet in these kind of forums, they pretend to defend us, and it's very hypocritical. Like I'm standing in the back while you're trying to answer questions and they're screaming, don't interrupt her, as they're interrupting you. And the hypocrisy is real, and I just want to say that not everybody of my race thinks like they do. You know, there's a bunch of us who are waking up, and I just want to let people know that, you know, we're not all a monolith. You know?
Of course, everything you've said is absolutely right. I think, unfortunately, those professors left.